this project, I took a chance and emailed the Australian artist Rona Green, who I have admired for years. I explained that I would love to show my students her work, and she kindly sent me a package with a selection of her latest exhibition catalogues and her best wishes. I also had found a soundscape composed by another Australian artist and created to accompany one of Green's works called Greasy Reese. I also found an illustrated description of the concept development of a number of Green's works on her blog. This scheme was to be delivered to TY students, and I thought the content might interest them. Added to that, the wide variety of available resources suggested that the scheme would also be an engaging one. Rona Green is a printmaker based in Melbourne, Australia. Her work has been described as explorations of urban subcultures through comic book depictions of hybridized animals. These figures, part human, part animal, inhabit a space where body ornamentation is key. In Green's work, tattoos signal real-life histories or inner fantasies. These markings identify the subject within a particular subgroup, whilst excluding others from that domain. These are the overall aims of the scheme. And the learning objectives. This was the exam question that was our goal. It was derived from question 14 of the History and Appreciation of Art paper, Leaving Certificate Higher Level of 2011. One change was made, and that was to include what is shown here in yellow. Instead of the category of a painting that depicts dancers, I changed it to a work that depicts an animal, and so it fitted our purpose. The group was given 70 minutes, and all bar 2 used all the time to complete it. So the plan. In Lesson 1, the students received an intro to the artist and her work through studying her exhibition catalogues in groups. Lesson 2, we explored the subject matter and influences of the artist, as evident in Greasy Reese and Pajari, our 2 selected works. This was carried out through watching an interview with the artist on YouTube, and also through the artist's own description of her concept development process direct from her blog. Lesson 3 was after the Easter holidays, and a recap was required. A soundscape inspired by Greasy Reese and created by J.D. Lopez kicked off this recap session. After this, we discussed composition. In Lesson 4, materials, processes and printmaking techniques of both Greasy Reese and Pajari was included, and a description of block printing and screen printing was in that. In Lesson 5, there was a sitting of the exam. So the methods I used in this scheme was mainly 3. The first was group work and research, the second was direct teaching, presenting, slideshows and the like, and also number 3 was discussion, group discussion in the class. There was a wide variety of resources used during this scheme. These are some of the exhibition catalogues that Green had sent me. Green and her work was first introduced to the group using these catalogues. They had lots of high quality images within them, showing a wide selection of the artist's prints and paintings. The catalogues also included essays inspired by Green's works. They had been written by museum curators, art college lecturers and art critics. These essays were obscure at times and challenged the students to identify the reasons and relevancy behind the texts. I gave most of the lesson over to this period of independent research, as there was a lot to get through in the catalogues. I also broke the class into groups for this assignment, ensuring that there was a spread of ability in all the groups formed, ensuring the possibility for peer assistance for those less able students and those with poor reading ability. I varied the difficulty level of these questions also, including easy ones to draw them in initially and to get them comfortable, like questions 1 and 2 here. The following questions sought their opinions and asked them to explain the way they arrived at these conclusions, which led me to a short discussion about the artist's message, social perception, character and portraiture. I had aimed high here with the catalogue essays, and I was slightly worried that I'd set the students up to fail, but no. With the push from initiated group discussions chaired by me. All groups identified some reasons for the inclusion of the texts and teased out the message included in them. As sketches of the works were also important in the answering of the exam question, each lesson ended with everyone sketching the two works, and this is one example. For the next lesson, I played the students an interview with Green, filmed in our Melbourne studio by the Australian art show Inside Art. I tried to use Green's own words as much as possible throughout the scheme to try and provide a more intimate insight to my students into the creation of her work. Primarily what I hoped the students to learn from this interview was a description of her process, demystifying it for them, and also giving them details of the two main influences on her work. This worksheet also alerted them to the relevant information that they needed to extract from this interview. I spent a lot of time on Green's creative process, her inspiration, subject matter and influences, and how she developed her ideas. The following is a depiction of the artist's making of Greasy Reese, as posted on her blog. I also showed them one for Pujari. I saved J.D. Lopez's Greasy Reese inspired soundscape for when the students came back from the Easter holidays, as I needed something different to get them back on board. While the track was playing, the students were asked to fill out an accompanying worksheet entitled Draw What You Hear. This was intended to be a fun exercise, however, it also served a purpose and was aimed at those who had an oral learning preference. The students really enjoyed filling out the sheet and produced quite varied representations of what they heard. Though all managed to depict the main features. I used the doorway in the classroom as a frame to replicate different types of composition, using my body in different positions within the frame, such as symmetrical and asymmetrical compositions. I then got a couple of students up to do the same, showing both closed and open compositions. A slideshow describing the materials, techniques and physical printing processes of both works was shown to the students in Lesson 4. For Greasy Reese, it was to do with lino print, ink and watercolour. And also with Pujari, we looked at the process of screen printing. Worksheets were regularly employed to assess students' understanding, and the marking scheme for the exam question was the same as that used for the paper in 2011. Here is a sample answer of the exam question and the illustrations which accompanied it. I was lucky to get to work with transition year students for this scheme. I found myself trying very hard indeed to come up with new ideas of how I could get the info to them. Not just because it was a requirement for this scheme, but also because I could. I had the freedom to. Those approaches that were a bit different, like the soundscape and the accompanying visual worksheet, or indeed the use of the doorway to represent composition, I found worked really well and stuck in the students' minds, as did the telling of stories. They were intrigued by these activities and also by the content too. During the first lesson I had introduced the scheme as an art appreciation scheme, and pretty much all students' shoulders slumped forward. I think I heard an audible groan too, but when I gave out the catalogues they all perked up greatly. I had included a lot of content for the time frame that I had. In future I would possibly cut down on this content to improve quality of learning. I also spent most of the time on subject matter influences and concept development, which resulted in a rushed presentation of the physical making of the works. I was so interested in the way the artist came up with the ideas for her work that I may have gotten a little carried away with it. Next time I will be stricter with myself on this. However, students answered well on the printmaking process part of the question, and less on the subject matter part, so it appears that I may have overloaded them in this regard. Next time I will give the exam question in lesson 1. I didn't do this time for fear that they would not show up for the exam, but in reality I had to tell them in lesson 4 anyway, so it made no difference. For them to have the question in mind would have been beneficial. I feel they would have known exactly what was expected of them, and it would have given them the bigger picture and a focus for their selection and retaining of information.